Another official sponsor of today's podcast is Noble Origins. Noble is a grass-fed beef protein complex, utilizing everything in the cow from nose to tail. It's personally my favorite protein. I like the vanilla the best. I like to mix it with raw milk. That is my favorite combination, but the chocolate is also amazing. I also had mentioned with additional sponsor, Sun Life Organics, that they have a shake smoothie called the Holy Cow. They also utilize Noble protein in order to hit that 50 grams in that shake. So again, go order it. Check them out, nobleorigins.com. Use code ADY for 15% off. Love y'all. Hello and welcome back to the Ain't Dead Yet podcast. On today's episode, it is a solo mission. We are going to be discussing the Rocky Raccoon 100, attempt number 3. This is the pre-race podcast. That attempt is coming up here in 4 days. We are about 6 weeks off our previous 100-mile finish at the Brazos Bend 100. We spent a lot of that time traveling, recovering, kind of working back into some movement, and got a couple good weeks of volume in just to make sure the body is still holding what it needs to. We feel pretty good. Right now, we're just really focused on nutrition, hydration, rest, mobility, the things that we can control. There's no fitness that's going to be built at this time. So that's what today's episode is on. That's what we're going to be talking about. I've given backstory on multiple episodes around the first 2 attempts at Rocky and those failures. Those were in February of 23 and February of 24. Attempt 1, we made it 60 miles and broke. Attempt 2, we made it 65 miles and broke. This will be attempt number 3, and we're going to make it 100 miles and be broke. That is the goal. That is the vision. We're going to approach it the same way we did the Brazos 100. We're going to be out there until they blow the whistle. We're going to play the whole game. And I think with that mindset going into this race, it's going to provide us with a better outcome, honestly. I used to go into this race with like pacing goals in mind or focused on heart rate or how long I was spending in aid stations. And really what it's about is just continuous movement. It's about continuous, relentless, forward progress. And I'm learning that not only translates in ultra, that's also life. So I'm just excited to get out there Saturday and enter that pain cave and kind of sit in it for a while and see how long we can hang out in that cave. I think that after the last 100-mile experience, I've gained a little bit of knowledge on what things could potentially feel like deeper in the race. And I'm not afraid to go back there. I think that it's quite a revealing place, to be honest with you, but it's also a place where a lot of growth happens. There's a lot of tension in those moments, but a lot of growth. And so I'm really excited to re-enter that space. We've got a couple buddies running the race. My buddy Matt Ritchie, who's been on the show, is also doing the 100-miler. He's in the same crew, same posse, if you will. And then my buddy AJ Ward out of Virginia is flying down, and he's running his first ultra. He's going to do the 100K distance. He was actually one of my pacers at the Brazos Bend 100 and caught the bug. So he's flying in tomorrow on Wednesday. And then on Thursday, we're kind of going to wrap everything up here around Austin, head to Houston, get camp set up, get settled in, and just get ready to really send it on Saturday. I think that everyone's head is completely tapped in and locked in on what it needs to be. And what that looks like or what that is just complete savagery. Like nothing matters right now. I don't care about anything for the next 4 days. The only thing I care about is crossing that finish line and the feeling of entering that pain cave, specifically miles 60 through 80. I think that that's really where the darkness resides. And so I'm just excited to enter that. And, you know, you have to bear with me. This is going to be a much shorter episode than usual. Some of you are probably saying, thank God. But I do want to take a minute and talk about a little bit of the strategy as far as the relentless forward progress goes. So the goal or the plan, obviously, like baseline goal is finish the race. Rocky has between a 30 and a 32-hour cutoff. Usually it's dependent on conditions. It looks like it's going to be wet. It looks like it's going to be muddy, potentially, some standing water throughout the course. Hopefully not as bad as last year. Last year they had some pretty substantial flooding, which made things really interesting. But it is what it is, man. You're going out there to suffer. You're not going out there to play in the sand and watch the waves crash and see people in bathing suits. It's a suffer fest, and that's why you sign up for it, and that's why we're going. I have every intention of this being my last 100-mile race. I have zero intention of ever doing another 100-mile race. So I really want to go out there and just leave it all. And whatever happens, happens. And, you know, I've said this to a couple people I'm close with, and I think it freaks them out a little bit, but I'm at a place in my life and I really believe this is part of my purpose and my pursuit of where I want to be. You know, if it kills me, it kills me. I'm at peace with it. If I die out there on that course, like that's okay, but it'll be on the course. It won't be in a chair. It won't be on the sideline. It's going to be out there in the trenches. And again, that's just been part of the mission since day one. You lean in to the suffering. You lean into what's scary. You lean into the things that make you uncomfortable. And it's definitely uncomfortable to go toe the line for the third time at this race. I mean, I've literally failed it twice. And to go back a third time, if I sat here and told you there's not a heavy weight behind that, I'd be lying. There's pressure behind it. There's weight behind it. There's fear behind it. But all of those things combined, if applied correctly, will create diamonds. It's not going to crack me in the sense of, you know, mentally not being able to stay out there for the duration of time necessary. If they pull me off the course for missing the cutoff, so be it. But I'm not coming off without that being the reasoning. With that all said, this race is 5 20-mile loops. Race starts at 6 a.m. The plan would be to be back at camp after the first loop between 10:30 and 11 a.m. and to be back at camp again between 3:30 and 4 p.m. And that would put me at 40 miles. At 50 miles, I can pick up a pacer. I have a couple people coming in that are going to pace. I'm really excited to spend those dark moments with them and get to know them on a much deeper level. But, you know, that's really when the race starts, is after mile 50. I think the first 20 miles is kind of rough because in your head, you're like, dude, I'm just getting started and I'm already feeling this or that. And then 20 through 40 is kind of like, all right, we're here, we're in it, we're doing it. 40 through 50 usually feels pretty decent, at least in my experience. But something about hitting 50 and being like, holy shit, I got 50 miles to go. That can be mentally challenging. So I'm going to approach that a little bit differently this time. When I get to 50, I'm just going to tell myself, you got 1 mile to go, dude. You got 1 mile to go. And I get to 51, you got 1 mile to go, dude. 52, you got 1 mile to go, dude. And I'm going to hammer it like that all the way through 100 or until they rip me off the course. That's the intention. And again, as much as we've loved talking about the deep, dark times of life and how to get through them, I've been in my own struggle recently, mentally and emotionally. It's been heavy, really heavy. And I'm trying to show up for it in the same way when I go speak to these kids and tell them to show up for it. Head first, like right into it, lean into it. I think that is so developmental for us as long as we have the right support systems around us. We can lean into these things and we can push through them. And so I'm really excited for that opportunity this weekend to kind of go even deeper into that. It's one thing to be struggling mentally, emotionally, and to be struggling with rest and hydration and nutrition and all this stuff. It's another thing to take all that and set it aside and say, you know what, all that is true, but I have this opportunity in front of me to do something that I never thought was possible. I never thought finish 100 mile was possible until I did it. Now it's like, can I do 2 in 6 weeks or 2 in 7 weeks? And the plan is to show up and smoke it. After this race, the only thing on my schedule is in April, and that's to go back home and do this race called the GOAT. That's the Blue Ridge Marathon, essentially, back in Roanoke, Virginia. And it's a 5-day event. And over the course of those 5 days, you do every race distance. And on the last day, you do a double marathon. And so that'll be kind of, my plan is that being my final like ultra experience. And then I want to lean into some other things, more functional fitness, overall health and well-being. But I'm excited to push the envelope. And I can't say that I'm done with ultra forever. I think that would be kind of ignorant of me because I've put my foot in my mouth like that before, but I can say this, I'll be done for a while. The pain, the suffering, honestly, the post-race depression, everything you go through in one of these is pretty heavy. And as exciting as it is to train for it and go through the process and show up on race day and to cross the finish line, the burdens that come with it are equally as challenging, right? And so I'm excited to kind of shift that into something else. I'm going to continue to push myself. I'm going to continue to seek out suffering and growth. I just don't think it'll be over the course of 100 miles on foot. we might do something else. I might try to swim across the Pacific or something and pop up in Japan. Who knows? But we're excited. Like I said, I'm not going to spend too much time on here yapping today. There's not a whole lot to talk about. You just kind of like before Brazos, it's just time to show up and do what we've been training to do, and to put it all on the line, and to make peace with the outcome, and know at the end of it that you gave every last drop of whatever you're made of. And that's my full intent. So I appreciate your time today. I appreciate you guys listening in, and we'll see you back here soon on the Ain't Dead Yet podcast. Thanks, and have a great day. Hello, and welcome back to the Ain't Dead Yet podcast. On today's episode, we are going to give our post-race thoughts of the Rocky Raccoon 100. If you're listening to this, you've just heard the pre-race thoughts of the Rocky Raccoon 100 that we came in and recorded about 2 to 3 days prior to that event. It's now been 2 or 3 days since the event, and we came just to recap, talk through kind of what occurred, what happened, and some of the successes and challenges along the way. So first and foremost, I have to give a ton of gratitude to my crew, my family, my friends, all of my support system. It was quite the mental battle, I think, just to show up and toe the line. A lot of people don't talk about that aspect of it, but when you failed a specific race 2 times, it takes a lot out of you just to show back up and send it. And I certainly experienced that. I had a big weight kind of on me to show up and make sure I got the job done. But long story short, man, we got down there, and the weather was supposed to be really nice and supposed to be perfect conditions. There was a lot of people racing, well over 500 between the 100K and the 100-mile distance. I was doing the 100-mile distance, and it was one of those things where like I said, I've done that race twice. So the pre-race nerves didn't really get to me. Like, I knew what to expect. I understood intrinsically how bad it was actually going to hurt. I had a really good idea, or at least I thought I did, just because I've done 60 and 65 miles at that course, and then I just did a 100-miler at Brazos about 7-8 weeks ago. So I thought going into it, I had a pretty good idea of what I was going to be feeling and how, painful things were going to be. But I was wrong. I had no idea. I experienced a whole different level, and I'll get into that. But good news, we show up. It was like a guy's trip, honestly. There was 3 of us racing in our Airbnb, and then we had 5 additional crew members come out. Some of them flew in from Nashville. Some of them came down from Austin, kind of all over the place to support these 3 guys. So the 3 guys that actually raced were myself, my buddy Matt Ritchie, and my buddy AJ Ward. Matt Ritchie was doing the 100-mile distance. It was his first 100-miler, and AJ Ward was doing the 100K distance. It was his first ultramarathon officially. So it was fun because all of us, it was just a bunch of dudes hanging out during the weekend on the lake. But there was pressure, I think, for each of us, just in a different way. My pressure was to get redemption and finish the deal, because and I told you guys this, like, my full intent is to step away from the 100-mile distance, and it still is. That is 100% what's going to happen. I am no longer interested in competing at that distance. I've kind of proven what I need to prove, and I can step away from it now knowing that I kind of emptied the tank there. The other 2 guys, it was their first attempt at that distance or at an ultramarathon in general, so they had a different kind of pressure. So we kind of balanced each other out. I was able to show up for that, and they were able to show up for me and keep my head on straight. So it worked out pretty well the night before the race leading up to the race. The morning of, so Saturday, February 1st, we got up at about 3:30 in the morning. I started blasting Creed through the house as soon as we got up. Yeah, Creed's kind of my go-to for locking in. Started blasting that through the house. Everyone's kind of getting ready, going through their bags one more time, make sure you got everything, lubing up your feet, taping your toes, lubing your body, kind of like all the pre-race routine stuff, especially any superstitions that people might have. So we went through that, and we got in the cars and headed to the course. The race, the 100-mile distance, started at 6 a.m. I think we got there a little after 5, so it gave us time to kind of chill for a minute, which is good. I highly recommend that. Stepping out of the vehicle and starting a race that's 24 to 30 hours and not having that time to kind of recalibrate and reset, I think is detrimental to your success. But this was nice because we had about an hour of float time where we could really focus in, dial in our equipment, dial in our nutrition, make sure we were good to go, we were feeling good. Stretch out any that we needed to, that sort of thing. So that part of it was amazing. And then the next thing you know, the gun goes off. It's 6 a.m. and it's time to go. And so Rocky Raccoon is set up as 5 20-mile loops. So each loop you get to see your crew, you get to kind of reset if you need to do equipment changes, reload on nutrition, all that kind of stuff. It happens at that point. And then during that 20 miles, there's 3 aid stations where you can stop and refill on fluids. They have hot food. I've mentioned this before. Rocky Raccoon does a tremendous job, their volunteers especially, of their aid stations. They provide some of the best food, the best energy, and having done other ultras, by far, Rocky Raccoon's my favorite environment and group of people to be around when you're in that suffer. But we clocked out, went and did the first loop. Body felt good. And the first loop for me is all about, honestly, backing it down. You know, you want to go out and you want to burn the matches. You want to send it. The challenge with that is you still have 80 miles once you get back. So my whole goal this year was just to be smart. Reserve, be smart, reserve, be smart, reserve. And I just kept playing that through my head. Like, you have time, you have time. And so it was, even with that mentality, it's the best first loop I've ever had at that course, probably by 20, 25 minutes. So I was really excited for that. Came in, felt pretty good. Didn't really make a lot of equipment changes, just reloaded on fuel. I was probably in aid for 10 minutes max and went right back out for 20 through 40. 20 through 40 was a lot like 0 through 20. I think the mental battle starts between 20 and 40, where it's kind of like, holy shit, like, we have a long day. We're going to be out here for a while. Time to settle in and just make sure we're taking care of ourselves and we're moving as best we can at all times. And so it's a lot of that going through your head on repeat. And then I'm kind of breezing through the first 40 miles because, again, I'm a big believer. The 100-mile distance, the race doesn't really start till mile 50. But 20 through 40, that's what happened. 40 through 50, I knew I had 10 miles to pick up a pacer, which I think gives you a lift. It was still daylight at that point. I was under 12 hours at the 40 to 50 mile mark. So for me, that was uplifting. I hadn't done that before either. So I was able to get to my mile 50 just as the sun was setting. So I felt awesome about that. That meant I basically had given myself 20 hours to go the back 50 miles. So I'd done the first 50 in around 12 and a half hours, something like that. And I had about 20 hours to do the back 50. So I felt really strong in that moment, knowing that was the case. The fear that I was carrying is that mile 50 through 60 in the past is kind of where I started to shut down. And so this year was just all about stay consistent 50 through 60, stay consistent 50 through 60. And that was the goal. And that's what I did. We came back into camp at mile 60 and I was like, okay, 2 loops to go. It's dark out now. To me, the whole trick in ultra is to make it either finish in the dark or make it through the dark. But it's a lot easier, I think, to quit in the dark because it's quieter, it's lonely, it gets colder. A lot of times the moisture picks up. It just, Mother Nature, isn't sensitive or softer. It doesn't really care about your needs. And so to me, 60 through 80 was the battle. Very similar to Brazos. And so I set out at 60 and I picked up my buddy, Brett Ender, who's a close friend of the show, and he paced me 60 through 80. And it was a grind. It was my slowest loop. It was that way at Brazos 2. The second to last loop was the slowest. But it was my slowest loop. There was a lot of suffering in there. There was a lot of questioning, whether or not we should be doing this. And the other thing that happened during that loop was around mile 70, I felt something pop, like something weird in my leg. And I remember thinking, like, damn, like, I have 30 some miles left. How are we going to accomplish this with that going on inside of my body? And I remember just being like, here we go again. And I honestly, truth be told, like, let the negative mindset creep in pretty deeply. So much so by the time I got to mile 80 back to camp, like, I walked into mile 80 with every intent to pull, to stop. And fortunately for me, I had a really good crew. They all kind of jumped in and started working on my leg and working on my feet and working on all different parts of my body to try to get me back. I was probably in aid this time for 40 to 50 minutes while they worked on me. And it wasn't until probably 30 minutes into that where I was like, all right, maybe I can get a couple more miles. And I remember getting up out of the chair and going to the bathroom, and on the way to the bathroom, kind of having this conversation with myself, like, dude, do you really want to come back and do this shit again next year? Do you really want to dump another entire year of training into this? Is that really what you want? And I remember just having this conversation with myself, similar to what I shared in the pre-race thoughts, is like, nah, man, I'd rather die out here than do that. I don't want to come back here. And truth be told, I hate that place. I hate that race. I love the people. I love the event, but I despise it. Um, and so I was there for redemption, and I felt like this was going to be the window. I had 20 miles to go. And so I came back in, and my crew gave me a pace. They're like, look, you got to stay under this number to beat the cutoff. And that number was 20 minutes and 40 seconds per mile. And I was like, all right, well, 20 miles at a 20-minute pace. That's what's between you and everything else you want in your life. And kind of in that moment, you have to ask yourself that question, like, how bad do you really want this? Is this really your purpose, to show up and never quit? Or is it something you just want to talk about on social media for likes and following? And so all of that kind of clicked in my brain at the same time. I said a quick prayer, and the decision was, I'm going to break it off, and God can take me if God's ready. And that's what we did, man. I set back out with my pacer and sent it, man. I mean, pushed. I think the first 3-4 miles we came in at like 15-minute miles. We were saving time, and I think we came in at the 10-mile mark, so mile 90, sitting at about, I think an average for that loop was between 16 and 16 and a half minutes per mile. So I bought a lot of time for the back end, and I did that intentionally because the back end of that race is really where the rubber meets the road. The front end isn't too bad. The back end is just demeaning. There's out and backs and straightaways that just seem like they go on for literally decades, and it'll mentally break you. So I just remember starting that backside being like, all right, I've got, I think at that time it was 4 hours and 15 minutes to go 10 miles. And I was like, dude, I got, like, I can accomplish that on broken feet, broken legs, no hip, no back, no ass. It don't matter. And so I set out at 90 and just put my head down. And I think that right there really is, those are the moments in those races that kind of determine who you are. I can only speak for men, but as a man, like when you're completely broken off, everything's stripped away, who are you going to be? What are you going to lean into? Is your why big enough? Because I can tell you right now, if it wasn't for the kids back home that I genuinely think follow me and pay attention to me never quitting and never giving up, always getting up. I genuinely think if it wasn't for them, my why wouldn't be big enough anymore. So I always talk about this evolution of your why. And over the last year, that evolution has become these kids and showing up and by action, showing them that quitting just isn't an option. So I just put my head down and went to work for that back 10, 12 miles. And we ended up crossing the finish line with about, I think it was 31 minutes to spare before the cutoff. And again, when I crossed the finish line, it was kind of like, it was almost an emptiness. I've talked about this before on the show, but the finish lines don't carry weight, right? What carries weight is the process to get to the finish line. So all of the months leading up to it, years leading up to it, of hard work, dedication, focus, determination, sacrifice, saying no to things that you want to say yes to, all of that is part of the process that I think really helps you grow and develop as a human. And so by the time you get to the finish line, it's kind of like, all right, that's great, but now it's time to keep growing. That doesn't mean I wasn't proud of my effort or my team. I was super proud. It felt great that they handed me that belt buckle. But at the end of the day, life isn't about the outcome at the end, right? I genuinely believe that. It's about the impact you make in the process. And so I was able to reflect on the process over the last 3 years of that race and kind of seeing how I've grown as a man. And some ways I've grown tremendously. In other ways, I probably should dedicate a little more focus to. And so I'm excited to lean into that in this next chapter. But yeah, that was kind of the overall race. As I mentioned, I messed up my leg pretty bad at mile 70. So after the race, they actually dropped me off at the hospital to get x-rays. I'm still waiting on MRI results. Did some pretty legitimate damage to my leg. Didn't really feel it until the adrenaline cooled off, probably, I don't know, 4 or 5 hours after the race. It really crept in. But outside of that, my body feels good. It feels exactly how it should. It's not supposed to feel incredible. I'm not supposed to feel like I can go run 100 miles tomorrow. But I can promise you this, if my life depended on it, I could step out and give you 20 right now. So that just shows that the training paid off. I had good coaching. Shout out to Matt Johnson. Good support system. My nutrition was dialed. I did all the right things that I could possibly control. And everything else, you kind of just have to give up or surrender to. And so really grateful for the outcome, but I do want to take a second and talk about the next chapter for me and what that looks like. So over the course of time, my goals have really evolved. I haven't moved on from anything that I haven't completed, no matter how long it's taken me. So this was big to get done so I could move into something else with the full steam ahead. And I'm excited to move into a couple different things. You know, big goals for this year is obviously to grow this platform, this podcast, kind of to continue to help people and get the word out there that they're not alone. So I'm trying to put everything I have into that. I have a construction business that is still important that we still need to lean into. I want to crack into some real estate stuff. And then I can't forget about the physical side of things. So for me, that competition's important. Right now, we're looking at getting into potentially high rocks, doing some high rocks competitions. I see a lot of guys doing it, and the competition looks fun. It looks like it's really driving a lot of people to improve. So I want to step into that world and see what that feels like. And then from a mental emotional perspective, I plan on kind of doubling down and putting a greater emphasis on my therapy. I've went back to a previous therapist that I used to see he's, I would say, much more deep diving, not surface level, and he has no bias. He's kind of what I need in that realm. He's very direct. He tells you the good and he tells you the bad, and he gives you homework. And so for someone like me, action is everything, and I can really appreciate that approach. So I'm doubling down on that. And the overall goal in all of this is just to continue growing. Like, that's the answer for me. I only suffer and struggle when I feel stagnant and there's no growth. And so I'm really trying to lean into this continuous growth. There's some other big goals on the horizon for me as far as my personal life and things I would like to accomplish in that. But I'm just letting those things develop right now naturally and organically. And I'm just deeply, deeply focused on my purpose, my mission, my impact, and how I show up for others. I really believe if I do that correctly, everything else is going to take care of itself. So, not to be short-winded, but that's the overall race recap. It was hard. It broke my body off just like I planned on, but we got it done, and that's what matters at the end of the day. And that's the message to the kids out there, especially. You can fall short 100 times, but as long as you show up at your next opportunity, ready to try again, that's what makes you a success. That's what determines your value. Now, if you fall short and then you just decide that it's too scary, it's too big, I think that's where the word failure probably creeps in, or shame. And so I think that, for all of you out there that are listening, if you've fallen short in something, just lean back into it. You'll finish it when you're meant to finish it. And I genuinely believe that for myself. And I think that's why we're able to get it done this year. So that's the post-race recap of the 2025 Rocky Raccoon 100. That's a little bit of insight into what's next for us and the growth that we want to achieve. I appreciate the following, the audience. I appreciate our sponsors, Noble Origins and Sun Life Organics. You guys are incredible. We couldn't do this show without you. And that's about all we got for today. I love you, Mom, and I'll see you guys soon. Bye.